We are not on record yet. Oh, we
Well, I
are.
just pressed the button, but you didn't say anything.
I'm fine. I can say everything.
You're in the dark, Heiner.
You don't like me in the
No,
dark?
I like it a lot. I think it's really cool. You're this
You
sort of.
like it?
Ah, yeah,
The
we've seen the room
old
before.
images and the world of imagination and reality.
Yeah,
I just did my video for the Jean Gebze Society with this background. And
cool.
this guy was really thinking all together.
Okay. And yeah, your lighting is great. I like it. I think I should show up by candlelight next time. No, no, it's fine. Don't change it. You're great. Don't change anything.
And how about this?
What? It's fine. That's more normal. I actually like that you're in the dark there. Don't just because I comment on it, you don't have to change it.
My life has been backstage in the dark anyway, all the time.
So you're coming out of the dark now.
I think this is the ruin point story now.
Yeah. So yep. What went well, let's get into something. Well, we are expecting some more people, I think.
Huh?
Like there's Martin.
Martin.
Martin's a little bit in the dark too. Well, that's
Dave
maybe a little better.
Fleming.
That's a little better. Hi, Martin.
Oh, Heiner, Doug, me. Small group.
Well, sure, it will grow, but it's fine if that's what it is. We could maybe use some like women or something.
Women, yeah. Always need them. You can't live with them and you can't live with them. So,
There they are.
There you go.
well,
Hi,
who's here, token woman?
hi, Cheryl.
It humidifies the air, it warms the air, and it slows it down, the current, the actual velocity of the air, and the volume of air going in. And by the time it hits the airway,
That was cool. Sort of out of the blue. I don't know what that was, but it was interesting. Letitia.
Hello.
Hello. So, well, the topic today is what rocked your world. Don't know if that's clear. Do you have a moment of awakening in your life where suddenly things cleared and you knew what to do or something like that? So how does that work? What can we do with that? And are we really doing what we woke up to realize we're here to do? I don't know.
Interestingly, I didn't get the title. I always was thinking about what is wrong with my boat. So I, with the boat, hit the ground and I'm dead or near dead. So are we talking about ruin points? Or are we talking about major changes like a leverage point, according to Daniela Meadows, where we make everything different and sail into another direction, saving the world?
That's sort of how I interpreted it. But yeah, I could see you would like it to either be that your boat was rocked or some rockets of some kind, that incoming rockets, I'm not sure. Where I was more like rockets taking off into a new and better direction, but it could go either way, I think. And actually, it's a good point. It doesn't have to be sort of a positive, now I get everything. It could be a rather horrible time in your life where somehow you were forced to change or something.
So it's
So
not skyrocketing, but really a point, maybe even out of my control, which made all the difference.
yeah, I think that kind of thing. Things changed and maybe not in your control. Something happened.
I have a question.
Yes.
That's kind of an idiom in English. Is that translate to all the different places you come from? Rocked your world?
I didn't even think of that, but you're totally right. That probably doesn't make sense in German or or in a bunch of other things. You're right. What the hell does that mean? What rocked your boat or your world?
I mean, in English, if something rocks your world, I mostly hear it in a positive sense. But it could be in a very negative sense as well, you know, of the death of somebody or whatever.
Yeah. And well, I do kind of like ambiguities like that, so it's not necessarily a problem. But I'm hoping we can take it in a positive direction of what somehow gave you a key piece to work with. I mean, that could be something bad. You got really angry about something and you kept being an activist about this particular one thing the rest of your life. That's possible. Hello, Simon.
Good night, everyone.
Are you in China or something?
I'm in China. It's midnight Wednesday night. It's now Thursday morning, 12:06.
Okay, so midnight. I need to put China on the list of time zones. Particularly your part of China. I'm sure there are several time zones, aren't there?
No. It's funny enough, the whole of China has one time zone, which makes no sense whatsoever. But I am in the right, what do you call it, quadrant. The Beijing, Shanghai quadrant is, longitude is fine. But if you go west 3 hours, it's still the same time.
Okay.
Because the communists decided that, no, we have to be together, so let's do it all together.
Well,
which makes no sense.
It's practical in some ways.
In some ways,
like
in other ways,
yeah.
It's crazy. Anyway, here I am in my apartment, inside a school, inside a compound.
It looks a little school-like.
Yeah. This is the living room. Connie is in the other room sleeping.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right. So does somebody have sort of an example of your world being rocked that we can start with?
I can start with my example if you like.
Sure.
I was in Hawaii at Volcano National Park looking at the petroglyphs that fascinated me. And one in particular I found, I thought I'd read all the books about petroglyphs, but this was quite different. That was before I had a cell phone, let alone a camera. Anyway, I sketched it, showed it to an old Hawaiian guy who was my teacher and a healer. And he told me it was very important I should meditate on it. Well, I did, and it took me quite a long time, maybe 14 months, before it clicked into place. And that symbol was fantastic for showing me relationships between family members and all the confusions that are possible with hints at how to resolve them. I didn't believe it. When I had the realization, I tested it thoroughly, probably with 1,000 people or maybe 1,000 couples even. And it holds water, it sticks. It changed everything I was doing in terms of working with people's emotions and relationships. And I teach it regularly to therapists. Nobody believes me at the beginning. They all think I'm full of stuff until they see me demonstrate it quite a lot of times. And that simple event, a Hawaiian volcano park, certainly changed my life and through me many lives of other people.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Simon, you've seen that in action.
I was just going to say I vouch for that because I've been through that experience. And I was in a couple of volcanoes with Martin in the Big Island.
What rocked your world, Simon?
What rocked my world? When I discovered the word unlearning about 18 years ago. Is it 18 years? Yeah. And I started getting very curious about it and started searching. And it led me through so many different paths. And all of a sudden, a lot of people that I had known, famous people and revered people and important people and respectful scientists, they all sort of merged together. I go, oh my God, like this is really fantastic. They were all connected. A lot of them lived in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they all knew each other. Well, I didn't know that. And so I found that very fascinating through that one simple word, and doing web searches took me through a bunch of other places, and it led me to Martin at one point, and we connected there. And it led me through to Ken Wilber, integral theories, and life has never been the same since then. Like I'm still Simon, but I think my whole system functions differently, and sometimes it's hard to explain to people what it is that is happening inside, because I still see an old man walking around, and that's about it. And there's a lot more, which I will explain at some point. Not tonight. It would take too long. So that's what rocked my world is, just one word. And I've been told many times that word has got a negative connotation. Should use a different word. Think of a different word. Use it differently if you want to make a presentation. I go, I don't know. To me, it sticks. Other people say letting go. Let go of things. Don't hang on to things. There's so many different ways, but it still comes down to the same word, to suspend your normal, everyday way of thinking and believing that you think that you know something, and well, you really don't know that. And Fleming taught me to say, pay attention. And initially I said, pay attention. I have to pay, like I have to pay money to pay attention. And I tried to change it to something else, and I realized, no, it has a positive connotation. So unlearning, paying attention, and the Hawaiian way of thinking that I recreate myself every moment of my breath in and out. It's a recreation of me. So that's all of that has rocked my world.
Hello, Harry. We're talking about stuff that rocked our world, and first we talked about what the hell that means and whether that translates.
Should I know that?
Well, I'd like to share. When I read the topic, I was intrigued because I wanted to come and hear everybody's story, what rocked their world. And then it had me thinking about myself, because it referred to purpose. And I understand now that I might have an unusual experience, because I have had purpose since I was a child that was directed and reflected by trusted adults. that gave me a sense of focus and purpose. The world would be changing. I needed to prepare myself to step into roles of leadership, to learn all the skills to be able to ensure that people were safe, that I was safe. So purpose wasn't so much a problem. But what I've had over the course of my lifetime has been moments of ahas that created sort of an integration point. And I want to just focus on one, which happened in the 80s. And it was when I began feeling like I was insane. As a child who lived in a bicultural environment, moving from a very small town to a big city. And I met a group of people because my therapist said I was hanging around the wrong people. So I started wondering, oh, who should I be around? And I ran into a gentleman by the name of John Omdahl, who I met at a weekend intensive on the UN, doing a process based on the UN's model. And out of that came a class, a year-long workshop that ended up being about 16 years, called Transformational Methodology Seminars, that morphed into the Imaginal Disc Group. But when I met John, my first moment of entering into his house was going into a room, and I was fascinated by how he described things and what he was thinking. And he said to me, well, my whole approach to the world, my view, is based on the theory, the theory of general systems, or general systems theory. And I said, well, what is that? And then he walked me into his office, and an entire wall was covered in this graphic that was extracted from a book on living systems that identified, and it was just this swirling pattern of spheres, and it had the identifying factors of what a system was. And in that moment, it hit me, because it was like nesting dolls. I could see the whole world and its interconnectedness, where everything had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that regardless of whether it was animate or inanimate, that we shared this same process flow, and we were interrelated, and that I was a living system. And this was a language that I could adopt to be able to listen carefully to all the other languages, foreign languages that we speak, but also scientific model languages, colloquial languages, that I could be present with whatever was being, because I was also a living system. And that set the course for my understanding, and then many arrays of a deepening in that knowing. And I want to say that what that did was give me a framework for the innate, what I would consider animistic worldview that the rest of the world could relate to. So that was my big aha.
No, I went through several sort of steps in trying to answer my own question here. Like at first I felt like, well, I did have some changes in my life, but it wasn't really much. I couldn't really put my finger on anything particular that happened. It's just I ran into some things and changed my mind about stuff, and suddenly sort of did things differently. it's a little fuzzy. But if at the same time, if I look more closely, I do have points of dramatic changes in my life, but they're often sort of very convoluted and sort of personal or mystical or half unbelievable what exactly happened. So that, and that it might make them good stories in certain settings, but at the same time, it's not stories I would like to present all too publicly. Sort of like it's nice to have a neat story of how you changed, how you suddenly found your mission and so forth. Like this happened, and then I discovered this, and now it's all different. Mine are sort of more sort of intertwined, and so I don't know how to tell them neatly, but it's sort of maybe in part of a process of finding that, or I don't know if one has to package them neatly. But let me start somewhere else. That I mean, there are many points in my life where I felt sort of a waking up kind of thing, which sometimes was not pleasant. Like I remember when I was a child, just sort of suddenly one day, every day, in gray, cold weather, I would get up in the morning when it's dark, and I would bicycle to take the bus, and I would stand there waiting for the bus. And then one day I just sort of woke up and realized how gray and dull that was. And there was no big wisdom or anything at all that came out of that. It was just realizing, whoa, here I am. And there's a sort of certain type of here I am that I have once in a while, just every few years, actually. I mean, there are many points in between where I become very present, but there's a certain type of noticing, oh, here I am in my life. And often it sort of scares me a little bit, and it doesn't even last very long, and then I sort of forget about it again. But there's a point where I'm like, wow, what did I do the last 10 years? That's weird. And I don't even know what to do with it, but it's sort of a meta awareness of here I am in my life now. I'm this old, and this happened, and I wasn't even paying attention for years. Strange. But then it sort of goes away, and I go back to normal. And of course, my normal, lots of other weird things happen in between. But there's this kind of slightly unpleasant waking up, which is not that much different from a little child waking up and realizing, well, the world is all gray. People are just driving by, going to work and taking the bus, and it's cold and it's raining and foggy. And then going back to being sort of half asleep. I don't know. I didn't tell any of my really juicy, weird transformation stories, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Interesting. You were telling about stories long way back. And I was first thinking about a survival story, 10 adults, 10 children, 5 cars in the Rub al Khali in Arabia in the 70s. But then when thinking further, what really rocked me, this was just the survival story was only that we through magic got saved, close to death. Then what really rocked me was a double rock or a double kick. We had in our car an accident with very high speed, BMW at the Autobahn. So you see, my wife was driving and I was brought by helicopter to hospital. That's been knitting me together. But what really happened was a second blow, that my client, 2 weeks earlier, he had become my boss, stole all my material because that group was in the process of being taken over by a new Europe, high-tech and biotech, venture capital groups all over Europe, not just German Bank or Rupert Holding, Diamonds or Oranje Nassau. And I was really thrown out of all these contexts. And even then, going to Boston, I could not get an acceptable position anymore. And I went back to my old thing on environment, culture, development. And through that, I came back to my earlier fatherly friend who was an architect, and a new one later, because then I went, and that's why I'm saying it, because Laetitia mentioned the systems idea. This was Jan Christian Smuts who started holism and tried to integrate vitalism. And this Smuts and Jean Gebser I mentioned before we started the recording, they were all something like the big figures like Ralph Seo influencing Ken Wilber on seeing systems in a holistic and healing and transparent understanding mode. So for me, it was a failure, totally doomed and losing everything, family and whatever you can have. And on the same time, going back to new horizons and not getting lost in high-tech computer, all industry, military, remote sensing, and whatever computer graphics applications at time. So you see, I still have the energy on this thing, and I never told it, but we are here family. So I can tell you, the harder they come, the harder they fall, but sometimes it takes 30 years.
So there are 2 points for me in my life, and they were sort of a progression. The first was in a weekend workshop, and I was a student, and I was around 46. And there was a particular point in the weekend where there was a guided meditation, and I came out the back end of it for the first time in 46 years with a full 100% connection, ownership, experience of me, of I. And I had never felt or known him before. And so it was the beginning of a long process of getting acquainted, growing into me, and the second touch point, which was, I think, probably around 55, was a conversation with George Poor that he had asked for. And by asking and by creating that opportunity and connection, gave that I, that me, validation that I have a voice, and that I might have something to say and contribute. So the first was, I exist. And the second was, I might have some value and meaning in the world. So that was like number 2. And the sort of hypothesis testing validation of both of those was my sort of focusing time and attention from a place of unconditional love and being audienced to my father. And after being at war with him forever. And after 2 years of listening, having him turn around and ask me what I thought, which was the first time in his, I think at that point, 82 or 84 years, he had ever asked another human being for their opinion about anything. So all three of them sort of got me to a place of about what it means to be me, what it means to be a human being, and what the real sweet spot is. And also sort of a connection to how powerful coming from that place can be as a change agent in the world. And I'm complete.
One of the biggest changes in my life was a period of time where everything sort of went wrong, but where I came out better for it. It was around 1990 or so. There was a period where I was very sick with pneumonia. I spent about a month in bed. I was having all sorts of problems and my back went out. And at the same time, economically, my life was sort of crashing. I lost my house and my very well-paying job, and everything that suddenly magically was working before suddenly wasn't working. And at the same time, so it was like everything sort of went wrong in a certain sense, but in another sense, I made a complete reorientation of my life. Various mystical and strange things happened at the same time. But one part of it was before that, I was very sort of arrogant, in a sense, thinking I knew a lot about lots of things in life. I had all the answers in many ways, and we didn't shy away from sharing them with others, but from a point of that I knew better than everybody else. At the same time, I was also following other people, gurus and systems of various kinds that would teach me how to know everything about everything. And I was very proud of my sort of status in accomplishing things according to somebody else's systems. And I took that very seriously. But that totally changed at that point. Everything sort of crashed. Everything I sort of knew suddenly was of no value. It was kind of like, it's all bullshit that I couldn't really do anything with it, and I wasn't really in control of life. Before that, I thought I was really hot stuff and in control of my life completely. It was happening exactly the way I wanted it. But life sort of proved to me that it wasn't, so by letting everything crash. And there was a rather hard period to get through. But when I came out of it, I came out of it much better, in the sense much more humble. Somebody who was much more feeling and experiencing things rather than thinking about what they should be. So I changed my orientation completely. And it was a while before I found all the positive changes in it. I also had more compassion for other people. But one thing that changed was, instead of looking outside myself for the answer, or who has all the answers that I can go on and pay to learn from them, I realized that suddenly I didn't need anybody else in a certain sense. So I realized that I could look for myself. Like, I could just as well as anybody look either at what's right in front of me or deeper into the mysteries of life. And I suddenly realized I could write and speak, and that I had a voice, which I didn't have before. Before, I could sort of parrot other people's information, but now it suddenly became I could look for myself, and I could give you something how I see it, from a rather humble place of this is just how I see it. And after a little while, I realized that often was useful for other people, that actually sometimes I did say something useful that actually applied to others. But at first, it was really just my personal, I don't need a guru, but I'll look for myself. And later I realized the value of that as sort of a skill in being able to take a fresh look at things and be able to say something often wise or useful about it. So anyway, so it came out of a horrible situation where my life crashed, and later on I realized that the package I ended up with was probably better in many ways. There's still some pieces of the old me I would like to not necessarily get back, but master again. Since then, I've sort of sucked at money, but before that, it just flowed very easily. But anyway, I'm more happy with the me now, and just to say that it came out of mostly bad experiences at the time that forced a reorientation in my life that made me my new me.
Well, I guess I'll say something. I'm almost overwhelmed. Like, I was afraid if I talked, I might cry. Because I identify so much with each thing each of you have said so far. Like, you could have taken the words right out of my mouth. Seriously, identify with those things. I would say especially Fleming and Heiner, the idea that sometimes it's not a big thing, one specific big thing, and sometimes it's not a great thing, it's a horrible thing. And also, I'm very interested to know all the specifics, to hear the deeper stories here, realize that we are short of time, and so I can't tell my deep stories either. But if I was going to sum it up, there were so many things that I could say if I was going to sum it up, if I ruled out all the bad things, so we don't turn it into a sad story here. But just of the good things, I would say the biggest thing that probably rocked my world is the discovery of the internet and the community out there, and how you can't find those people as your next door neighbor very often. But if you look out into the world, there they are. And that changed everything in my world. Conversations like this, so many other things that I do online, connections I make, ideas, seeing other people's ideas, just that great wide world. I guess that's what rocked my world. Because that encompasses so many things, so many experiences.
I don't feel that I have. I could find some shocking stories in my past, but I think I'm kind of in the middle of trying to do something similar as been told by you guys. I'm doing something I thought I would never do. I'm separating the love of my life and trying to move out. Just a second, and I'll be back because this. Okay.
one thing I've certainly gotten better at along the way is to reframe horrible things that happen while they're happening. Meaning, instead of realizing years later that, oh, that changed my life, to do it more in real time, like to have a sense of humor about even the worst circumstances you might find yourself in. And then actually things change faster when you're able to do that. You can sort of see the light in it, that this is going to be a great story to tell, or this is probably going to change, this will have to change something. So to be able to see that at the moment makes it easier to bear. And I would tend to think that you do the required transformation faster. But I had to learn that at some point. That earlier in my life, bad things were just sort of bad things. But at some point, I realized it was always more.
I see it as a spectrum. You can be really angry or sarcastic or ironic, or go on the positive side more to reflecting, taking it with harmony, or making a joke out of it and mirror it to other people so they can also learn. So I think this spectrum of how we learn to cope is what concerned me, and I realize now. But what I felt during our stories were these abrupt changes, like you fall down the cliff and no way back? Or was it like bending the trend so you could smoothly adjust and transform? And I think the real changes sometimes lead extrasensory perception or near-death experiences, need something like a real hard blow that you leave your mold. So I felt your stories were sometimes smooth intellectual changes, and sometimes really the whole world rule set reset is not as it was before. And if you then stand up again and stand up again and again, this is actually what you can tell in stories later to future generations or so. Everything else, it's just television.
We can go on with you, Harry, if you want.
Okay. I'm in the middle of trying to change my life and address my greatest fears. And as usual, then all kind of changes come together. So I sold my house, separating my wife, moving back to the Netherlands from Belgium. Almost out of my money, hardly any work. So basically the classical transition stuff. And but the hardest part is that I'm try to survive my deepest fears. I was born as in a family of 8 from a mother who had no mother herself. So you see, basically did not know what to do with us. And so from one day to another, I can be okay, and I can be so scared of life and so ashamed of being on this planet that it's very painful. But the nice thing about it is I'm starting to be conscious of it, that it's pain and it's not me. That's one side of it. And the other side of it is I have a sense that I am not born without a purpose, but I'm struggling to find it. I know I have my talents, but I feel very incapable of using them properly, etc., etc. So I have a kind of lack of trust, and that's the way I am at this point. So I can't tell you what rocked my world. I just feel my world is rocking right now. That's what I would like to share. So this is Harry live from Antwerp. Thank you.
I'd like to say, be strong, Harry. That's heavy.
I won't die. I'll just hope I come out at the right end.
Yeah.
And maybe, let go a little bit, like some of the other people have articulated. We can't control everything.
No, I'm just trying. That's what I'm doing, I guess. Just I know where I am, and I'm not stupid, and I'm not gonna die. But I sometimes fear that I might not. Kind of drop into one black hole, and I will be unable to find the way out. Something like that. I spent a few days there, Sunday and Monday, so I'm just back.
Now this reminds me, sometimes our past, or the way that the environment we found ourselves in, particularly when we're very young, it kind of colors everything, and it rocks our world in a subtle way throughout our whole life. And, like Harry was talking about your mom, she was a little misguided because she had no guidance, and then she didn't know what to do with you. And then it's really easy to slip into being afraid because you come from a place of kind of being afraid. Even though you got over it, when times are hard, you can't help but going back to that overarching thing in your life. It kind of colors everything.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Neil Donald Walsh, Harry. But he ended up on the street, literally, with nothing, and then started asking the question, and somehow within himself he found the answer. I don't know the reality of that narrative of Mr. Walsh, who is now a multimillionaire, and he was trying to be a humanitarian. He's still a multimillionaire, though. But part of his story is true, and it's been replicated in many places in the world with many interesting people who have just seem to have lost everything. But if you go back to what Fleming is saying, when you become more aware and aware of the position that you're in real time, rather than waiting, okay, I'm going to wait 5 years and then I'm going to look back and go, oh, that was a really interesting thing, and it actually was a positive change for me. Put it into the real time. It's happening to you. So all of our stories are actually merging into your story because it's happening right now, in this now. So it's no longer something that happened to me 17 years ago. I rocked my world. So we all, I'm sure, sending you our love and lots of good, positive vibes and energy. We're with you all the way. Namaste.
Thank you.
One thing I've certainly learned in my life is that it's not particularly linear, even if it looks that way. You're not getting out of your trouble necessarily by solving it and finding the answer. I mean, it might be part of the process to have to work on that, but suddenly one day it's different. And it's hard to imagine in advance how, but later on we can make up stories of, oh, then suddenly it struck me. It tends to be that way. I mean, you're in a situation as long as that somehow gives you juices to drive your life, and then suddenly one day it changes. And I do firmly believe that the more we can be present with it, like we just talked about, in real time, like this is Harry's life right now instead of just a story about 17 years ago. And I think the more that each of us can do that and be able to face what is actually our little bit hard to describe situation we're trying to transform now, it will change faster. I mean, the more you can be present with it, there's no guarantees that then suddenly you're a millionaire. That's not necessarily what will happen, but the more you can be present with it, the more the next step will arrive more smoothly. So, and I think that's in part what we're doing here, trying to get it more into the present moment, not just interesting stories that explain all of it, but how can we live it right now while it's still a little bit or very uncertain. We don't know what the hell will happen next, and we sort of have to admit that. But if we can be present with that, I think it's at least will be more fun and probably will move faster.
Yeah, I would like to add that I can very much relate, Harry, to everything that you shared. My biggest fear was that I would be homeless and that I would age into a homeless bag lady. And if the truth be told, I'm upscale homeless. I'm a traveling priestess who lives a gift economy, that I live a life of total uncertainty. I really don't know. There isn't a goal. But what I found, Harry, is that when you don't isolate, when you allow yourself to be held by your community who can affirm the possibilities for you, not to design your future, but to remind you of who you came to be, who you said you came to be. In the darkest moments, it's not easy to remember your greatness. And that's what community is about. And they may be a virtual community. They may be someone who opens the door to you that says, come stay with me for the weekend so that you can just shrivel into a mountain of emotional tears. I will feed you. I will check on you so that you can just be in the center of your transformation. And I think that's really where we need to sort of shift with one another, because life is extremely uncertain at this point in our global history, in our shared environment. And it is places like this, in this virtual environment, that provide both the broad view that's transpersonal, interconnected, but highly filled with love and compassion and deep listening to see who you really are. Not who I need you to be or who you told me that you wanted to be, so I have to force you into that box. You know, this place of uncertainty is a place of possibility, and listening for that next step isn't always easy. Being new is always uncomfortable.
Thank you. I very much recognize that, because I'm not this is not so difficult just because it's about me, but I think the world needs people to stand up and do what's necessary, and I sometimes just don't have a clue, and I cannot afford just to crawl in a box or under a stone and or any comfortable situation that makes it easy for me, because that's been offered quite a lot to me. Okay, just stay there and just do whatever I've been told, and then you'll be fed and you'll have sit there until the end of your life. But for some reason, I'm totally convinced that I have a role to play. Sometimes I don't know what to, but I'm just one wheel in the. Yeah, I'm part of the whole system, so I cannot opt out, and that's what makes it kind of impossible to stop this. To step out and just take a holiday or something like that. Thank you.
I just want to say as well that, like Harry, for me, you're actually a shining example of somebody who's able to do what we're talking about here. That you transparently, honestly will tell us what your situation is, and there's no neat sort of wrap-up answer of this is the beautiful, motivating, new agey thing that it means. You present it while it's still a problem and painful, and I think that requires a lot of courage, and it allows us to connect with being able to do that. In some sense, I think that's more real and honest and powerful than clever transformational stories where we've already wrapped up what it means, and then that led me to discover this, and then I became really successful. Those are neater, but it doesn't require as much courage to present them. It requires courage to present where you're at right now and not having a solution to it.
Well, it's not courage, it's my back against the wall. There's a lack of choice as well.
I want to acknowledge what Letitia said. I really that really resonated. And Harry, I want to, I acknowledge you for your sharing, but I want to also acknowledge you and I keep bumping into each other in a few of these different groups, context, communities. And somebody at some point said that 90% of the battle is showing up. And the thing I got really clear about for me was that I'm not my story. I'm me. And I have some real stories. I'm sitting in the middle of a real story, but I'm not it, and it doesn't inform who I am. One of the things I want to share is you can be generative by putting stuff out in the universe and creating channels and being open to stuff coming to you. That's not an asking for a solicitation or having, it's not about asking others to do for you. It's about you creating opportunity and potential for the universe to present you with stuff. And that can come in all sorts of tangible and intangible ways. And we're so programmed to be transactional. And you and I share something in terms of our gender. Our gender is like exponentially programmed and culturally set up to never, ever ask. I don't need directions. I don't need help. I can take care of this. And that whole testosterone male crap. And none of that's real or true. And so you're being here, your contribution and presence in every circle that I've shared with you is really valuable to me. And you bring a lot of presence and power. And to whatever extent individually I can help or provide support in the ways I'm capable of doing that, I'm available to you. And I suspect there's a universe of people that feel exactly the same way toward you and about you. And all I'd suggest is be open to all of those possibilities and don't be bashful about exploring any and all of them without any judgment or English or cognitive bias or prejudice or crap. Just like let it be okay. Because I got to a place circumstantially, I'm like on the balls of my ass. I live on the northernmost edge of one of the famous ghetto cities in New Jersey. I have no fear about being okay. Like on some reduced ultimate bottom line, triple bottom line, I know I'm going to be okay. And if you're at the bottom and you know that, it's all good. So I'm complete.
How was this song? I think it was Nothing Left to Lose. I think it is very easy to go into fear and then be stuck. But what really helped me is digging out again what I learned in the 70s. And we just mentioned with Wilber what he took from Jean Gebser, that we all can focus in transformation on one thing. So I'm very rational. But when you see Jean Gebser and the evolution of consciousness, 20, 30,000 years, then he said it was a magic and the mythical and then the rational and then the integral. And we are on all these levels. And we as society, with our societal consciousness, have been going down by being rational, by being perspectival. So this learning of the roots, what Thompson said was the pillar for Wilber or so, helps you to really let go, let loose, and see that on all these wavelengths, may it be magical, may it be mystical, you can learn, and this integral shimmering through diaphanity, he calls it, this transparency to get out of the box of your present thinking or your present way of conceptualizing or presenting or communicating. This helps you to get this looseness or freedom, like saying, nothing left to lose. I can die tomorrow. I did my thing.
That's what worried me most. Did I do my thing? I still feel like I have to do my thing. I don't mind dying, but that's okay. Then okay. And my wife has cancer for 10 years, so and I see this happening. That's just okay. Then you're dead, and then you're gone. But that's simple. That's the simple part. But while I'm alive, I have the feeling that stuff needs to be done through me, or I have to do stuff, and that better be the right stuff, because I feel, and that seems to be normal every time, that I need to do it now, or at least tomorrow or next week or the next 10 years, but it needs to be done.
We have passed the top of the hour. Any ways that you guys can choose to wrap this up? Go ahead.
I will say that I love the topic, and I thought it was valuable. And I'm surprised to hear that what rocks people's world often is losing it all and then feeling like I have a second life. I get to do whatever I want with it now. So I'd love for if we ever had a topic that would say, tell one story.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this experiment. I'm not a fan of all the experiments, but this one in particular, I thought included the whole being and not just one area of focus, but it allowed for this timeless flow. You know, this experience of the aha to me and the allowing of that in our lives is critical to the ongoing awakening that we need to step into the future. And it's extremely uncomfortable and very uncertain, but so necessary. And my prayer has always been, I'm not afraid of my lessons, but could you please make them beautiful and delightful and fun? So I share that with you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you all for just being there and listening to what I had to say. This I was scared shitless, but it's very, very valuable to me. Thank you.
Harry, we are very selfish. I think we appreciated you now, not to avoid the rush, but to really do something together.
Well, this looks like it has been a successful experience for me specifically in terms of technology. The system didn't go down. I was able to talk and you were able to listen all the way from China. I was really concerned that the internet would just drop, but it worked, and I don't even have the VPN on. Actually, I had to turn it off because it looks like Zoom is not compatible with ExpressVPN. So I'm taking my chances that my computer is going to be taken over. That's fine. But I'm sure that I'll have stories to tell you living in China, even though I'm surrounded by a lot of educators. 95% of them speak very little English, and miscommunication is the order of the day. So really learning to be present becomes really super important, is extremely important, because miscommunicate, and people can get really frustrated. Some of my teachers are, what? They go, slow down. It's just miscommunication. Oh yeah, because they think differently. No. You think differently. You need to open up your perspective, and then you'll see that it's fine. So I keep trying to be the peacemaker in a lot of situations, because people come here with certain expectations. Like they expect to go to the beach and not to have sand in their toes. Says, what's wrong with this beach in Mexico? It's full of sand. You know, it's getting into my underwear, my toes, and I can't. It's impossible. Sorry, it's been there for the last few thousand years. And to go somewhere else where it's rocky. So it's the same thing. It's been very good. Okay.
All right. I think this has been lovely too. So let's just say goodbye. This has been great. I'll think of something for next time. Wonderful seeing you.
Yeah.
So have a continued pleasant day. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.